Hey guys, what's up? And today we are going to be taking a look at the much anticipated Open Flywheel Project Gen 2 Eclipse setup. The original Eclipse system was hyped as being a new glass ceiling for brushed single-stage flywheel blasters. However, it fell short due to some manufacturing issues, primarily in the flywheels. So let's go over some of these changes and see how much improvement you can expect from the Gen 2 Eclipse. Starting with some minor changes to the cage itself, the Gen 2 cage has larger countersinking on the motor mounting holes for easier installation, a slightly shorter dart guide, and larger wheel wells. All of the cages and wheels are intercompatible, so if you have an older Gen 1 cage like me, it's compatible with the new Gen 2 wheels. However, I just figured I'd note some of the small quality of life improvements with the Gen 2 cage. The major difference with the new setup is the wheels. Gen 1 had some manufacturing issues that led to unbalanced wheels, and in some cases rubbing between the wheels and the cage, resulting in lower performance than expected. They also seem to be fairly rough on darts, resulting in fairly frequent decapitation when compared to similar setups. The Gen 2 wheels are now made in the US, feature elliptical rather than circular grooves, and are a different color to make them easily distinguishable from the Gen 1s. I measured the pair of the new wheels to be approximately 5 grams lighter than a pair of the previous wheels. To install the motors, we simply need to align them in the cage and secure them with the 4 small not-included screws. Note that the metal cage allows for both brushed and brushless motors, whereas the 3D printed version, at least with the previous cage, only allowed for brush motors due to heat output limitations. To make the flywheel installation easier, I'll be using the OFP motor support and the new flywheel installation helper. This little helper piece is basically a 3D printed part that has a little dimple in it that matches up with the top of the wheel, and it allows you to push it to the correct alignment consistently and pretty easily. There's a little hole in the middle, as you can see, where the motor shaft will basically meet the top of the wheel, and that'll set that to the correct spacing for the cage. So as you can see, it sort of just pops on the top of the wheel, and then it helps you to push it on to the correct height. At the time of filming this is a prototype piece, however it should be available soon. Although very simple, that piece made it super easy to install the flywheels correctly the first time, and I didn't have to adjust the alignment, which was nice. To test the performance of this setup, I'll be pairing them with Fangs Revamped from Foam Blast. The ones shown here are the N-War exclusive set, however they should be the same as the normal ones with the exception of the different coloring and the engraved logos. These were recommended by several parties including Phil, and apparently they can perform decently on both 2 and 3S, so we'll be testing that out in a second. Then the rest of the setup is comprised of a 21 amp switch, 16 gauge silicone wiring, some other bits and bobs from Foam Blast, and then your normal Strife internals. As mentioned previously, we're going to be testing this on both a 2S and a 3S LiPo, so that way we can see if there's a large performance difference between the two voltages, 2S being the stock voltage for the Fangs Revamped, and they're overvoltable to 3, however that might decrease the lifespan, so we'll see if that extra performance boost is worth the decrease in life of the motors. And then for darts, we'll be testing 5 different types of darts. We'll be doing your standard elites, AccuStrike darts, waffle heads, men gun, and then a HVZ mix of darts, which is varying types of darts and conditions to sort of simulate what you might pick up at an event and what might be a pretty realistic scenario. Then we'll be firing off 18 of each just to simulate what you might expect out of a standard mag for each type of dart at each voltage, so that's a total of 10 tests, so let's just jump right in. So I'll make a chart after this because it's kind of hard to see and I don't want you guys to sit through all the testing. However, for the first set with 3S on standard elite darts, we are looking at a high of 196, a low of 145, and an average of the 18 clip of 168. Okay, now to go over the results of the test real quick. Some of it was actually pretty surprising. I'll put some charts up on the screen as I go over it, just to make it a little bit easier. For 3S, the fastest dart achieved was an elite dart, ranking in at 196 FPS, which was the highest shot of all testing. Then the lowest was one of the dart pool ones at 98 FPS. That was probably one of the ones that got decapitated. And then the average, the highest was also the elite dart at 168, and the lowest was the dart pool at 137. I'm willing to accept the fact that the dart pool may be the wild card here, as you'll see with the 2S testing, just because the darts were completely all over the place in terms of quality and type of dart. So it might have, while good to test, it's not the most consistent. Now for the 2S testing, the highest was an AccuStrike at 178, and the lowest was an elite dart at 99 FPS. The averages for the 2S actually surprised me quite a bit. There were a few in the 150s, the highest being the AccuStrike at 157 average, and then the lowest being the Elite at 126 average. I also put this table together just to show the comparison of the 2S versus 3S difference, and I was surprised that this wasn't larger. I'm not sure actually what the reasoning for that. Phil had also mentioned that some people were able to achieve fairly high FPS numbers on 2S, so I'm not exactly sure why that is, but I'm glad that I did some initial testing for that. In terms of dart damage, you can see two different types: total decapitation, as I've been calling it, where the head just gets completely ripped off, or in some cases it's more towards the center. And then another type of damage where it looks like the wheel kind of pinches it, and it basically leaves like a tear along the bottom half of the dart. So you can sort of see little pieces tearing off of that. There was a few like that, and then a few total decapitations, as you can see. However, compared to the Gen 1 system, this is not nearly as bad. And then it's maybe every like 1 out of every 10 or 1 out of every like 7 or so darts, if I had to give a rough guess. The majority of them did have some minor burning or tearing. As you can see, this is more of an extreme case. There's usually a little bit of dart dust that pops off when you shoot this blaster, but for the most part the darts aren't damaged too badly. It's still a factor to consider, however, it's definitely an improvement from the previous gen. The Eclipse has a lot of pros and cons going for it, so let's just go over those before I give my opinion. Starting with the pros, the big one is obviously the FPS. This is pretty much the strongest single-stage brushed flywheel setup that I've ever used. And then that also leads into the second pro, in my opinion, is ease of use compared to a brushless setup, like something if you wanted to make your own, or to build something like an FDL. It's a little more complicated in terms of electronics, so this is pretty much plug and play for anyone who's soldered before and used a Nerf flywheel setup, which, being how popular the Strife is, many modders have done that, so this is really easy to achieve that FPS with this setup. Some of the cons would be the dart damage. Although it's much better than the first system, it still damages more darts than your standard flywheel setup, so you gotta take that into consideration. And it's also really loud, especially on 3S. 2S wasn't too bad compared to a normal flywheel setup, but 3S was noticeably much louder. Being that not too many people have actually tested the Eclipse Gen 2 setup, I have a few mixed feelings, which is basically the 2S versus 3S scenario. I'm not sure if the 3S, depending on how long the motors last on 3S, it might not be worth it due to the not significant gains in my testing. However, I believe that more testing needs to be done on this. The system has to be out for a while to sort of see the results of those tests. Other things I would really like to do further testing on would be the effectiveness, being the distance total that this could fire on both 2S and 3S, and then how accurate it is at those velocities at those distances. So overall, just how effective this could be in a PvP scenario. Anyway guys, that's going to be my initial look at the Eclipse Gen 2 setup. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, or if you have any further questions or things you would like me to test. I definitely want to do further testing on this in the future. It's pretty crappy weather outside for the past few days, so when it gets a little bit nicer out, maybe we'll take it outside, do a full range test. And then I'd also like to do some more testing to maybe see the dart damage and to what extent. Maybe just order a bunch of different types of darts, try a ton of each and then take a percentage and see what the actual damage is and try to quantify that, as well as try to quantify the longevity in some manner. Anyway guys, as always, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in another video.